Baal Shem Tov had a student named Reb Chaim Rappaport that the Frierdiker Rebbe relates that the Baal Shem Tov once sent him on a mission where throughout his journey he encountered a tremendous amount of obstacles, and he successfully completed the journey and the mission. And that mission was to find a particular spring of water that, since the beginning of creation, had never been used to say the bracha Shehakol. The mission was given by a Rebbe, by Baal Shem Tov, to the Chassid, and it was a real mission. The bracha Shehakol could make the creation of an entire spring of water be worth it. So, interestingly, Shehakol is a very, very Chassidic bracha, because the Rebbetzins, particularly, before they passed on, asked for a drink of water. So Mrs. Sternberg relates that she was in the hospital at the time that the Rebbetzin Chabay Shvat, and she heard that the Rebbetzin asked for a drink of water, and she was filled with apprehension that she realized that this is the way Rebbetzin Rivka had passed away. She asked for a drink of water, said bracha Shehakol, and benched, as well as Rebbetzin Shtarna Sarah. Interestingly, the Rebbe Rashab and the Rebbe Maharash both made Havdalah on coffee so that the bracha Shehakol would be the last bracha. So what is it about the bracha of Shehakol that this is the chosen words and bracha that our Rebbeim and Rebbetzins, not all of them, of course, to our knowledge, said before their passing? So there's a famous Hayom Yom that when one encounters water, it's a siman bracha. So just that's not pshat, but when one encounters water, it's a siman bracha. Water is what we're saying the bracha on. The bracha of Shehakol we say on water. And the halacha is that when one isn't thirsty, one does not say a bracha. So one had to be thirsty. It couldn't be that the Rebbeim just said the bracha Shehakol because they wanted to say the bracha Shehakol. That halachically wouldn't be sound. There had to be an aspect of thirst. And so what exactly is the thirst that's involved in the bracha Shehakol that requires us to say the bracha that Shehakol Nihya B'dvarei, that everything is by Hashem's word? The Rebbe actually relates this in the year Tafshin Chav Beis on Varach Mechedesh Ir, that the Perek Yaveh says, "Have shaisa betzama estevrehem," that one should learn from one's teachers with thirst, and not have shaisa estevrehem betzama, drink their words with thirst, but rather in thirst drink their words. Which indicates again that when we're drinking, there has to be a thirst. And so what exactly are we trying to reach here? The Rebbe Maharash, in a mimer called Yesh Adam La'amalei B'chachma, explains that we don't refer to the Jewish people's desire or any real desire as hunger. Really, a real hunger for something is really when you're thirsty for something. When you're hungry for something, it's not as extreme as when one is thirsty for something, and thirst is really the real level. In the Rebbe Maharash's words, "V'lo amar lashon re'ev, she'inyan bechinas hatzimayin, he teshuka yeser nefla." We don't say the term hunger because the idea of thirst is a greater and more wondrous desire. And lachein amar tzamach hanafsh, that's why we say, "My soul is thirsty for you." And what exactly is this thirst? Again, so we're just bringing up the idea that in order to say the bracha of Shehakol, we need to have thirst. Ein mayim ela Torah. What are we thirsty for? What we are going to quench our thirst with. So if Torah is what we quench, Torah is compared to water. If we quench that thirst with water, so then Torah is what we're thirsty for. However, the Rebbe Maharash in the source explains that one is not always thirsty for Torah. In order to be able to desire Torah, you have to have an awareness of what's going on with Torah. If you don't know what Torah is, and Torah is basically locked to you, then you're not going to be thirsty. And so that's the reference to the halacha, Haishaysa mayim litzimain, if you're drinking water because you're thirsty. In other words, you could drink water and not be thirsty. You could be learning Torah and not be thirsty. There is such a situation where somebody is learning Torah and they're not thirsty. So therefore, the water is not quenching their thirst because they weren't thirsty in the first place. And in that case, one does not say the bracha of Shehakol. So the bracha of Shehakol is only said, and Bezras Hashem will explain what exactly is that, what is the words of Shehakol, what are we saying with those words. But one only says the bracha of Shehakol when one is thirsty. Therefore, if one is learning Torah and one is not quenching their thirst, they don't see the value in Torah, they don't feel the value in Torah, so then one doesn't make a bracha. In other words, there is a level where one learns Torah and not feeling. And so the Rebbe Maharash helps us to, how do we drink water with thirst? If I'm drinking water and I don't have thirst, what if the Torah is not talking to me? It's not open to me. The key to that is actually tefillah. When one davens, one engages with the praising of Hashem. Psuket Zimra, Tehillah LeDavid, Arei Mimcha, the beginning talks about how Hashem is a great king and I exalt him. This is how the Tzemach Tzedek explains it. And then it ends, and I will bless his name forever. So to just read it from the Tzemach Tzedek, but the fact that we say Tehillah David Arei Mimcha, and at the end we say this is referring to the fact that the true way to recognize, or what happens when one recognizes Hashem's greatness, is that one will start blessing Hashem. So to read it inside, Alakai Hamelach, Arei Mimcha, Alakai Hamelach, Upirish v'samach le, and near that phrase, I will exalt you, my King Hashem, and it's juxtaposed to v'samach le v'avarach Hashem chalaylam vayed, I'll bless your name forever. Mizem lamad. From this we learn shebeinin habracha shayach gam inin arei mimcha, that there is the connection, the idea of exalting Hashem. Shem shachas haraymimus, that is bringing down Hashem's exaltedness, greatness. And what does it mean literally? Well, how do you exalt Hashem literally? By saying, blessed are you Hashem, Akinu Melech Haolam, King of the world, Shehakol Niyeh B'Dvarei, by blessing Hashem. If you want to emphasize Hashem's greatness, the way to do it is by blessing Hashem in the form of a bracha, and particularly the Tzemach Tzedek. This is in a different source, the Al Tehillim, the Tzemach Tzedek's Maimarim teachings on the Tehillim, because Arimcha is from Ashrei, that the way to bring down Hashem's exaltedness, if you want to exalt Hashem, you want to say how great Hashem is, because you do realize that, because you're davening, you're in the middle of Ashrei, is by saying the bracha of Shehakol. So, to continue this source, we say bracha, but a person blesses and says bracha to Hashem. That through Hashem's word, the whole entire world is created. And so basically, when one is davening, and they say the whole Psukkah de Zimra is discussing Hashem's greatness in regards to the world. And then you realize that Hashem creates this entire physical world simply with his mouth, and then suddenly a person is filled with an awareness of what Hashem really is. And that actually creates the need to learn Torah. One is filled with a desire. To make this a little simpler, the idea of a bracha is it's a prayer. And so when one is learning Torah and they're not feeling like anything's really hitting the spot in regards to, feeling the connection to Hashem, they need to create their connection to Hashem in the first place. That takes place by davening. If a Jew doesn't daven, then, or hadn't davened or is not davening, it's not a segula action, although it is to a big extent, but davening really is where you get in touch with Hashem, you talk about what this world is really made of. And when you realize that this world compared to Hashem is simply a matter of his speech, you pronounce the bracha, and essentially the entire davening is saying the bracha, Shehakol niya b'dvarei. You then are filled with a desire to engage with Hashem in a real way. If this entire world is all purely from his speech, but is there a way that I can interact with Hashem in a real way? I need to have something more. What is my existence if it's only speech of God? What is my existence if it's only a matter of some words? And then we're filled with a deep desire to learn. And that's when the Torah quenches, because the Torah is Chachmas HaShakash Baruch, of course. And in this case, the Rebbe Maharash describes tefillah as achar, backwards, and Torah as pnimius, as panim, as face, kamayim panim al panim. It's the real thirst. The real thirst is quenched through water. So again, according to the halacha, that one only says a bracha if one's thirsty. That means that if the Torah is not talking to a person, a Jew, the Jew should engage with their Creator in a manner of tefillah, and then realize, and which will help the Jew realize that this world is simply by Hashem's speech. And so then how will I really connect to who I am and who Hashem is? By learning Torah. One additional aspect in regards to the bracha of Shehakol itself, why perhaps did the Rebbeim say Shehakol as they were nostalgic, the Rebbitzins as well, and it again had to be because of true thirst. So based on the fact that Tzimayin is really for Torah, caused by tefillah, there's no issue. Now we understand in that regard. There's a halachic requirement. In fact, spiritual aspects can create physical effects, as we know, as Reb Nachum of Chernobyl would get corpulent from saying Amin Yishmei Rabo with so much pleasure. And so there's no doubt that real thirst can come from learning, from desiring to be connected to Hashem through his Torah. But why particularly the bracha of Shehakol? An additional aspect is the fact, as the Rebbe says in Parshas Shlach, V'rachim Chedesh Tammuz, Tafshin Chav Dalet, that in order to benefit from Hashem's world, one must make a bracha and bless, to thank and to bless Hashem. And then there is this general bracha that includes all other things. That is that bracha of Shehakol, Shehakol niya b'dvarei, that everything comes into being by his word. That this is the idea of elevating worldly matters that are found in the category of a neutral klipa, a neutral state of being. And so really, Chassidus is really about recognizing how this physical world is really a home for Hashem and our mission in that. And so making a bracha on a cup of water, which is a seemingly mundane act. If you would imagine, what would a Rebbe do before the last action in the world? You think they'd learn some Torah, perhaps? They'd do a mitzvah. In regards to, let's say, something holy, something spiritual, rashbi, fire, surrounding a house, and our Rebbeim drink a cup of water. And the reason is because this is exactly what Der B'Tachtenim is all about, where the physical is used for Hashem, and that's exactly really all about the idea of this world. So a last action in this world it's very apropos that it be on a cup of water. Yeah, last aspect in regards to what exactly the bracha of Shehakol itself is trying to say is in the year Tafshin Tes Vav, Orliyem Ve'er Shabbos Kodesh, Bez de... I'm going to start that over. One last aspect in regards to what the bracha Shehakol itself is actually saying. In the year Tafshin Tes Vav, the Rebbe spoke about this in the context of a Sikha and said, Gam hashesa mayim letzimayim mevarich Shehakol niya b'dvarei. This is also the fact that someone who drinks water for thirst, says the bracha, kasher aimdim b'tnua shel tzimayim, when one is in a state of thirst, the Kabbalas all. So in this case, the Rebbe is talking about Kabbalas all. As a nirgash, the bittul to Hashem, then you feel Shehakol, that everything, even every physical aspect of this world, it's by Hashem's word. Like the Alter Rebbe one time said, he says that the Alter Rebbe at one time said he only sees the force in the act and in what exists. That this could also, it's not just a Rebbe who could feel this, any person can feel this. The fact that if a person is in this case of tzimayin, they're in a case of thirst, which is related to the idea of Kabbalah Sol, because it's accepting Hashem's yoke, because it's the aspect of bittul, and you're able to see how this whole world is created by Hashem. It's not a complicated thing to be able to perceive that this world is a creation from Hashem. With a little work, we can all achieve it. And the last aspect that I want to say is the Hayom Yom of Beis Adar Beis. The Alter Rebbe teaches us that we have to search for truth. And the Rebbe says that Avaida Zayda, the Avaida of MS, Ina Kamay Shetayim Bezeh Ta'as Gomor. It's not what people make, the mistake that people make, with complete mistake. Lachshav, to think, Shetzarach, Lefarik Harim, L'Shaber Slayim, that one has to shatter mountains and break boulders. Iber Karen Divel, turn over the world. Emes HaGamarhu, the complete truth. Asher Kol Avaida Upayal, Ezeshiyeh, whatever work, in whichever way, B'Chavana Mitis, with true intention, Dai Umaspik. It's enough to just do something purely to serve Hashem. The awareness of Shehakol Niya B'Dvarei, that everything in this world is really by Hashem's word. So instead of trying to beat around the bush, how are we going to make this successful, or what is the right level of Avaida, the correct thing to do? It's really simple. Hashem creates the world. We're a creation of that world. And that is true serving of Hashem. And the Rebbe goes on to say, a bracha b'kavana, to say a bracha with kavana, to say the bracha with intention. So the true Avaida of serving Hashem, be'emes, and if the Alter Rebbe wouldn't have put the word midas emes liyakev, the word emes, in the attribute of truth of Yaakov, with the word emes, those three words, but because of the word emes, in his Perek and Tanya, you would have 50,000 more Chassidim. But we're not concerned for 50,000 more Chassidim if it's not going to be a true thing. And so all one needs to do is just say a bracha, b'chavana, and that means just being aware that Hashem creates the world. And if there's a lack of desire for learning Torah, it's simply because you need to get to know your Creator.
Before I joined the Chidon, I used to look at the bookshelf full of Sfarim and think, that's not for me. When I opened a Sefer for the first time, my entire self-image changed. I suddenly realized, Torah is something that's available to me, something I can connect to. It opened up a whole new world.
I joined a course with Batsheva Learning Center because I wanted to take my learning to the next level. I got to grapple with the text on my own with curiosity, depth, and rigor.
I took responsibility for my own learning. It was life-changing.
Joining the Beis Midrash and being in a room full of women dedicated to investing in their own learning is a transformative experience.
I feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself, preparing for a world whose common language is Torah.
It starts with a single drop. It ends with the power of an ocean.